This is about a $1.2 billion or nearly about 10,000 crores of assets.
So if I don't do a 75 to 250 crore kind of investment, it's not worth my while. Every year we want 15-16% return. That means double in 5 years.
Mr. Murthy's driver becoming a crorepati.
Generosity of Mr. Murthy and many of the founders, that a large part of the holding was given away.
Welcome to a brand new episode of the Create Wealth podcast. In today's episode, I'm in conversation with Deepak Padaki, President of Catamaran Ventures. Catamaran Ventures, the family office of Narayana Murthy, is one of India's leading family offices and has made over 200 investments, including Accor, Paperboard, and even SpaceX. Having played various management level roles for over 30 years at Infosys and working with Nandan Nilekani and Narayana Murthy himself, Deepak has in-depth knowledge and experience in leadership and wealth creation. Let's dive into his journey. I'm Sandeep Jethwani, host of the Create Wealth podcast and co-founder of Deserve.
Deepak, the Catamaran family office manages money for probably the most well-known technologist in India, Mr. Narayana Murthy. His own family is illustrious in their own right. Sudha Murthy being a renowned author. I know Rohan runs his own artificial intelligence startup. Akshata has been in the news in the United Kingdom of all places. Now, when you joined Infosys in 1992, the company probably was very different. Wasn't even public at that time. It probably went public in 93, a year or so after you joined. Describe to us how Infosys looked as a company then.
So my employee number in Infosys was
Okay.
And but I think by that time some people had joined and left already. So probably there would be about 350 people in the company at that time.
Yeah.
And we were working out of two small offices in Koramangala in Bangalore. No big campus, nothing, not even in your frame of mind.
Okay.
Right. But one thing that struck me was, if I have to even think of, how I was interviewed and got a job at Infosys at that time, the entrance test was 4 questions, right? But it would take you 3 hours to answer those 4 questions because it was so analytical, and it really tested not whether you got the answer, but how you got the answer.
Okay.
And then the interview process with another founder of Infosys, the kind of questions and going deep into who you are as a person rather than what is it that you know.
Yeah.
Right. So this is the way that company was built in the initial years. In fact, I was part of the largest batch that joined Infosys in those days, which was 40 people. Okay.
Wow.
And we had to go through training for almost 16 weeks before you get placed on a project. I think that was an environment, even today, after 30 years, when I talk to people who joined at that time with me, we really reminisce about that part of being very intense.
Yeah. Deepak, I want to pivot to your personal journey and how you came to run Catamaran's investment portfolio. How did the switch to the investment side happen? What actually happened in the days when you decided to move to Catamaran?
No, it's a funny story, but I've been involved in some sense on the financial side, even at Infosys since 2008, 2009. I set up the M&A function at Infosys at that time after a long growth career on engineering and sales. And, it's a growing company, so you get many opportunities. I joke that sometimes I actually had 12 different jobs at Infosys because the company was growing so fast. It was a fantastic platform. Towards the latter part of my stay at Infosys, I also managed the corporate VC, which was investing in startups and startup funds.
From Infosys' own
company. From Infosys' own balance sheet, right? And then, I was thinking, of course, after 30 years at a company and what's next. And Mr. Murthy has always been a mentor for me. I came to talk to him about what I should do next. And he said, no, we need somebody at Catamaran. And, that's how it came about.
Yeah.
In a very strange way. But I joke today that it's a different boat, but the same fleet. That's what Catamaran is.
Interesting. Deepak, also one unique thing about Infosys' journey, and this was like post-liberalization, one of the early IPOs that happened, I'm told that it was a very hard IPO to sell because there were not enough subscribers and so on and so forth. But the unique part is this whole wealth creation that happened as a comprehensive group of people. It wasn't concentrated among the 6 or 7 founders.
Correct.
And at that time, this whole ESOP thing wasn't a very popular thing in itself.
It didn't exist actually.
It didn't exist. Wow. And there's this corporate legend of Mr. Murthy's driver becoming a crorepati and all of those kind of events. So how did the ESOP plan, or what was the equivalent of it that at Infosys, how was it implemented and how was it sold to team members?
We were the first company to give ESOPs, right? And so a lot of regulatory things had to be sorted out. But I think there was already precedence in the US about what ESOPs can do. The entrepreneurial mindset within the company is quite deep. ESOPs is a good thing. It aligns employee incentives with company incentives, direction, right? It's a great opportunity for creating wealth. And I think again, it's generosity of Mr. Murthy and many of the founders that a large part of the holding was given away.
Yeah.
Right. I can't think of even if you say Mr. Murthy as the founder of Infosys, I can't think of other examples where so much of wealth he has given away. So much of the stake has been given away. Right. So I think that speaks to this for the employee and for the professional kind of approach that they had. And so, of course, the stock option plans also came up over the years. But I think by 2001, 100% of the company was covered by stock options. Okay, everybody in the company had a stock.
So
option.
every individual
had, different amounts, but everybody had some stock option. And that makes you feel proud because the whole country and probably everybody in the industry worldwide is talking about the Infosys stock by 2001, right?
Sure.
So your sense of pride goes up that I'm an owner. It's creating wealth for you. And so I think it's a very unifying force.
Yeah. How was your own journey around ESOPs? Like, when did you realize that this is very meaningful?
At Infosys, in those intense times, you're not really looking at investments beyond this, right? And that is there. That's in some sense a safety net, nest egg, whatever you want to call it, right?
Sure.
I mean, it's the same money, but it takes on different hues as you grow up in life, right?
Sure.
So in the beginning, it was like, that's the one I'm going to use one day when I buy a house. And then after some time it becomes when you have kids, okay, I can always dip into that if I need to, right?
Sure.
And then when the kids are grown up, then you think, okay, that's for my retirement, right?
Amazing.
And then at some point of time you will say, that's for the next generation.
Yeah.
So I think the same pot of wealth, pot of gold is going to take different colors as you progress through life.
Sure.
And it's been like that for me as well. But it's always been a source of financial comfort to some extent. Yeah.
What is very different about Infosys is that they had multiple founders. And today, when you look at the sort of galaxy of leaders that Infosys created, obviously Mr. Murthy being one of them, and right at the apex of it, but there's Nandan Nilekani who's impacted India in so many different ways. Is called the CTO of India in some cases. How was it working with all of these leaders? And the second aspect to that is, how was your own journey to leadership? Was it like the company identifying certain individuals who would fast track to leadership? So just talk to us about the entire leadership paradigm within Infosys.
No, it's a very good question. Of course, all of the founders at Infosys were unique in their own ways. In fact, one of the things that I would say is, I don't know if it's a repeatable thing that you get 7 people with complementary skills, right? I haven't seen it repeated.
Sure.
Right. But we had a very unique thing that Mr. Murthy had set up at that time for the Leadership Institute, which is that you don't learn theoretically in the Leadership Institute. So, we had a few tiers of leaders that were selected, and each one, the idea was the top tier would be ready for executive roles within a short time period. The mid tier would be in, let's say, 5-7 years, and the bottom tier really looking at 7 to 10 years, they can become leaders of the company.
Sure.
Right. And so you had this laddering of leadership and laddering of leadership development.
Okay.
Right. Each of them had a different way of development. Right.
Okay.
But the unique thing that we set up in the Leadership Institute was that you don't learn it theoretically. the companies is the curriculum, right? The business is the curriculum.
In what the domain where you are working, that around that.
Or what I'm saying is that you're not reading a case study of in a textbook.
Okay.
The case study is something that is happening at Infosys today, right?
Got it.
The teacher is an executive.
Okay.
So I have taken courses on strategy. I have taken courses on risk management for younger colleagues, right? And of course, at that time, we were all fortunate, people like Nandan or Mr. Murthy, Chris, all of them, they were our teachers.
Sure.
Right, in the leadership. So you as an executive have to commit time to teaching.
Mm-hmm.
This is also a big thing, right?
Yeah.
You have to commit time. And these were like residential in the Mysore campus and so on. Mr. Murthy used to tell us so many of the difficult decisions he had to take.
Okay.
With examples, right? Saying I did this in the morning, in the afternoon, the client called in the evening, I had to take this decision and I was stuck between this and that. And this is the data I used to make up my mind and take a decision.
Sure.
Right. So then it becomes very ingrained.
It's very experiential.
Very experiential. Absolutely. Even today when Catamaran, if you have debates, there's a lot of debate over there. You should put money, how much money, what stake into what company. But at the end of the day, at the end of the debate, a lot of data is deliberated upon. And if that's decision is taken, then everybody backs it. Right. So that's the way it runs.
Sure. When you were tapped for the mandate to run the family office, what did the family tell you as being their objective out of this money?
One thing that's important for the family is trust.
Okay.
And me having known them for a long time, I'm assuming that was one of the factors. But we run it almost very professionally, which means that for us, the benchmarks are not necessarily what the family wants, but are we the best?
Okay.
And I remember coming in here and Mr. Murthy's lines to me were, how do we make Catamaran the best professional investment firm in the world? Right?
Interesting. And
not family office.
Okay.
Right. In fact, we don't want to be called a family office because the way we benchmark ourselves, the way we incentivize the teams, everything is on the relevant benchmarks in let's say public markets or private markets.
Got it.
Yeah.
And this is very interesting. Like when you say the best investment firm, one thing that naturally comes to mind is the returns that you will generate.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I'm sure there's a lot more beyond the just being returns, right?
Yeah. No, I think there is, the way there's a group of entities now that serve the family because they also have their philanthropy piece. They also have, Murthy Media, which manages a lot of the material that Mrs. Murthy creates through her books and so on. And then there's Catamaran, which is really running after returns to fund everything else. When we benchmark, for instance, we have Catamaran does all the asset classes, public, private, fixed income. In each asset class, we benchmark against the best. So we benchmark our public markets against the best mutual funds.
Okay.
Not just index.
Okay.
Right. We benchmark our private investments in cohorts with, let's say, CRISIL benchmarks.
Okay.
Right. So everything is around, can we be a really professionally run investment firm?
And in terms of the portfolio, one thing that I've seen very commonly in family portfolios is a concept of an investment policy statement, which is like almost risk management or checks and balances.
Yeah.
Is there an equivalent of that?
No, there is both on the private side as well as the public side. Whenever you think of family office, there are multiple parameters to address. There is a liquidity requirement, there is security requirements, there is returns requirements, there is reputation requirements, right?
Sure.
And so that piece is really the way we come into allocation, right? What percentage of your capital do you want in, let's say, direct investments where reputation is, takes a bigger significance compared to where you're distanced from the investment through a third party investment, right? So that's a percentage that we have to debate and discuss and decide.
Yeah.
Similarly, what percentage of public portfolio should be in, passive index versus active managed equities.
Sure.
Right. And then what are the risk parameters there, right? What should be our percentage threshold for the largest holding? What should be our percentage by sector? What should be the percentage of private versus public? In private, what should be the percentage in early stage versus growth stage versus late stage? So these are the risk parameters then we draw on. So you have to achieve your outcomes by balancing the risk parameters.
Sure. And how do the allocations work? Like in terms of percentages, what will be the allocation for public markets or Indian listed equities? What is the allocation for unlisted equities, for example?
So in the ideal scheme of things, it would be a third. And the way that is also derived is, we have taken a goal that every year we want to try and get to 15-16% return for the whole portfolio.
Okay.
That means double in 5 years.
Absolutely.
If I have to do 15-16%, the public portfolio typically is in that range. And then I have fixed income, which is required for security and some stability in the portfolio. To balance that, I need to do private. And that overall will come to 15-16%. Right? And so the allocation tends to be that way. Though depending on market situation, depending on what's happening, like for instance, now in the last, I would say almost 15-18 months, we've been a little over allocated into public markets because that's where we saw opportunity. And we are, it's the moment I find a great private investment, I'll pull money out and move it there.
When you were talking about the portfolio doubling every 5 or 6 years, it seems like, and from what's been rumored, this is about a $1.2 billion or nearly about 9,500-10,000 crores of assets. When that number becomes, say, 20,000 crores, can we continue to deploy it in the same way that we were deploying it today, or even that has changed over time?
It has changed. Right now, maybe if you tell me about 10 years ago, we would take smaller bets.
Sure.
Today, there are a lot of small bets that come to us, but sometimes we say it doesn't move the needle, right? So if I don't do 75 to 250 crore kind of investment, it's not worth my while.
Sure.
Right? So, which is also one of the reasons on the private side we have moved to growth and later stage investments compared to what we were doing earlier, which was early stage investments, smaller ticket size, right? So now we're saying if I have to make an investment because the corpus is there, if I have to move the needle, then it has to be a bigger investment with a better predictability of return.
So Deepak, you mentioned that on the public market side, you're investing in the index and you buy direct companies. You also told me earlier before we were recording is that that's typically less than 1% of the company's market cap is what you typically stay within. Now, when it comes to private markets, you're investing in funds as a limited partner. But you also do direct investments.
Absolutely.
And this quote here says ideas to outcomes. One of the cases that I do remember that you've invested in is, for example, ACO. And again, you were telling me that you invested very early on in the journey of that company. How did that investment come to be?
These companies that we have invested in, pretty much at that time, I think they were bright entrepreneurs, and we felt, this is a scalable business, and it needs a little bit of patient capital. It'll take some time to build the market in these categories. But they were all underscored with, can this product be differentiated in a fast growing and large market?
Got it.
Right. That's the primary aim.
So you're looking at the founder and the
You're looking at the founder, the idea, and the market.
Sure. One of the interesting things that you said, Deepak, was about this whole thing about patient capital. One differentiating factor between an investment firm like yours versus a private equity or a venture capital fund is that a fund has a finite life. At the end of 6 years, 8 years, 10 years, whatever the time period is, they have to return money to the limited partners.
Correct.
Is that something that entrepreneurs really look up to when they talk to Catamaran?
No, definitely. They come to us for that patient capital. But I must, color this a little bit, because while our capital is patient, it needs to see milestones.
Sure.
Right? It's not like I'm giving money into an investment and then I forget about it, and after 7 years I'll ask you what's happening.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Because we want to see that the money is being put to good use and it's actually delivering what it's supposed to deliver. But having said that, we can stay in these markets longer than funds.
Sure.
right? And of course, you can see, right, all the early stage investment, the companies that we talked about, we've been there for like 10 years plus,
Sure.
right? And that shows how patient the capital is.
Yeah.
A fund would not have been able to do that.
Interesting. And, the family at the end of the day is the ultimate beneficiary of these assets. How do they review, if at all, the outcomes out of Catamaran's portfolio?
Yeah, I think there also we have set a process in. One thing I must say, the way Catamaran runs, like we alluded to earlier, it's very professionally run. In fact, the family has been generous enough to trust us, and to a large extent, we run it independently, right? And given the illustrious nature of the family, like you mentioned in the beginning, a lot of incoming ideas go to them, right? People write to Mr. Murthy, people write to Rohan, people write to others.
Okay.
And but they just forward it on for our decision. Right?
Sure.
So day to day and everything else we manage here. And then certain transactions of a strategic nature, for instance, or above a certain threshold, obviously we go to them for their concurrence on some of those matters. Half yearly meetings where we just show them what the money is doing, and what are the challenges we're facing, what are the opportunities that we want to do, and so on.
And what are the typical questions that come up in a meeting like this?
Well, if you've worked with Mr. Murthy and some of them, you will know that it is pretty incisive, but to a large extent, they're not about individual decisions of investments.
Sure.
It's more about what is the process of investment.
So the question would typically be what went behind the decision, as opposed to whether the decision should have been taken or not.
That's right.
Got it. Deepak, this has been a fascinating conversation. I've learned a lot in this process.
Sure.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on this.